Welcome to science class. Today we are going to use geology to study evolutionary history. Darwin could not have published On the Origin of Species at a more relevant time. The science of paleontology was just starting to uncover a huge amount of previously unthinkable information. Richard Owen, another British scientist, coined the term dinosaur in 1849 and made the first real effort to put together and interpret dinosaur skeletons. The first dinosaurs ever named and described were Iguanodon and Megalosaurus. The earliest attempts at this were pretty bad, but they had no idea what these creatures should look like in terms of body proportion, posture, amount of flesh on the bone, and all that. We're still learning all kinds of things about dinosaurs. Despite the fact that we've known raptors were almost completely covered with feathers for decades, Hollywood still won't fix their dinosaurs. The discovery of these fossils and many others posed serious questions about life and poked extremely large holes in the previous ideas about life. The fact that the fossil record was almost entirely composed of extinct organisms was a big problem for reasons we have discussed. But what we also see in the fossil record was, yes, there are tons of dinosaur bones, and yes, there are tons of mammoth bones, but you never find them in the same layers of rock. People assumed that the Earth was not very old, and that all the forms of life that have ever existed at some point coexisted. But it turns out that no, the Flintstones is not based on a true story. Let's get started. The precursor to the theory that life evolves was that Earth evolves. Most people had assumed that the Earth could not be more than a few thousand years old. However, the pioneers of geology such as Nicholas Steno, James Hutton, and Charles Lyell studied geological formations on the planet and realized that preserved within these enormous layers of rock is a timeline of sorts. The layers look so different because they were made one at a time under very different conditions. Rocks are made of minerals, and minerals are compounds that can only form under very specific conditions. Basalt, for example, is this very dark and dense rock that forms when lava hardens on the surface. You can find massive basalt formations in places like Gooseberry Falls in Minnesota, where there has never been any volcanic activity in recorded history. This tells us that Gooseberry Falls in the very distant past must have been a completely different kind of environment. At the top of the Grand Canyon, a mile above sea level, you find a layer of limestone. Limestone can only form underwater, and there are fossilized corals all throughout this top layer. So was there a magical tiny ocean in Arizona a mile above sea level at one point? Or did present-day Arizona used to be below sea level? You can also find huge 10-meter long or more oceanic reptile or turtle fossils in places like South Dakota. This tells us that Earth has not always looked like it does in the present day, which was another revolutionary idea. The only way for there to be so many unique geological formations around the planet is if Earth itself has changed drastically multiple times. But nobody has ever seen an entire part of the ocean disappear, or a Grand Canyon suddenly form before our eyes. Earth must be at least millions of years old for all of this to have occurred. Later in the 20th century, we learned that Earth is actually more than 4.5 billion years old. Even as far back as the 1800s, paleontologists knew that fossils were organized in a specific way. Here's what I mean. If 75% of all species today went extinct, like what happened 66 million years ago, then in the future, we would see fossils of all the kinds of animals alive today preserved side by side. Humans, along with elephants, along with horses, along with kangaroos, you get the idea. We wouldn't necessarily find their bones right next to each other, but our fossils would all be found in layers of rock that date back to when the specific extinction event occurred. There are many fossil-rich formations around the planet, such as the Hell Creek Formation in North America, which has so far given us 72 Triceratops, 44 Tyrannosaurs, 36 Edmontosaurus, and many other dinosaurs and plant fossils. Not a single fossil of any known extinct mammal, like mammoths, short-faced bears, or any other, has ever been found in the Hell Creek Formation. Close by in Hot Springs, South Dakota, where I was born, is the famous Mammoth Site, where 61 mammoths have been found, as well as bears, oxen, camels, llamas, wolves, coyotes, birds, and others. Not a single dinosaur fossil has ever been found there. There are many fossil sites all around the world, and they all tell the same story. Certain groups of animals never coexisted. Dinosaurs went extinct long before mammoths ever evolved, for example. This was well known before Charles Darwin, but still nobody before him had ever put together a concise theory of evolution. Instead, people assumed either that all life had always coexisted and we just don't have the fossils yet, or yes, animals went extinct and then new ones appeared, but that was because new organisms were being spontaneously created. Over the last almost 200 years, we have found so many millions of fossils that we can debunk the claim that we just haven't found a human skeleton and a dinosaur skeleton together yet. But one day. But the fossil record also debunks the second claim of spontaneous creation too. The fossil record clearly demonstrates that genres and phyla of animals gradually appear, and sometimes suddenly go extinct. But what we don't see is whole groups of organisms suddenly appearing. Birds, for example, clearly show a transition from theropod dinosaur to modern bird, where they gradually lose their long tailbone, their teeth, they develop a beak, the fingers fuse together, and more. Ancient whales show a clear transition where we see the nostril gradually migrate to the top of the head, the modification of the front limbs, and the disappearance of the hind limbs. We have manatee specimens that also show the gradual disappearance of their hind limbs. Stegosaurus and Tyrannosaurus never coexisted. Groups of dinosaurs went extinct before other groups of dinosaurs evolved. So the groups of animals themselves show transitions. Another excellent example are the ichthyosaurs, whose fossils demonstrate over the course of millions of years their bodies becoming gradually highly modified to resemble sharks. I will end this video by showing you two specific transitional fossil species. One of the most well-known transitional fossils is Tiktaalik. Tiktaalik lived around 375 million years ago. Tiktaalik was a fish, but it had many non-fish-like traits. Tiktaalik had a neck, so it could move its head independently of its torso. Tiktaalik's fins also had bones. Lobe-finned fish, which exist today, have bones, but Tiktaalik had much more specialized bones. Tiktaalik had a humerus, radius, ulna, as well as wrist bones and finger bones, a precursor to all land vertebrates. Tiktaalik has a shoulder and clavicle bone structure as well. Tiktaalik also had a flattened amphibian-like head. Tiktaalik has many primitive features that would later become slightly modified over the generations, leading to true tetrapods. All land-dwelling vertebrates and their descendants are tetrapods. Or in other words, all mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and birds. We are all related to this one animal. Animal phyla, in a way, are transitions. For a very long time, fish were the only vertebrate animals on Earth. Then the amphibians evolved, and there were only two kinds of vertebrates. Then synapsids, which gave rise to mammals and reptiles, evolved, and eventually birds came out of the dinosaur lineage. The appearance of all those animal phyla came about gradually, not all at once, and each phyla diversified into all the different species it contains today or used to contain before going extinct. The last specimen to cover is Homo naledi. We are Homo sapiens, and Homo is our genus, or sometimes called genera. Any organism given the genus Homo is considered a type of human, and there were many species of human. In fact, long ago, we all coexisted. Around 300,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens evolved, there was also Homo floresiensis, Homo naledi, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalis, and the Denisovans. In fact, humans and Neanderthals interbred, and almost all humans, apart from those whose lineages are purely from Africa, have some amount of Neanderthal DNA in their genome. Homo sapiens have had the planet to themselves as the only human species for around 40,000 years. One important point about this is that this picture is not correct. It suggests linear evolution, where this species gives rise to this species before going extinct. But evolution is a process of gradual branching and intermixing. Homo sapiens evolved from another species of human whose population would have been isolated from other groups of the same species. Well, not totally isolated because, like I said, we interbred with Neanderthals, for example. Gradually, the genetic makeup of that group of humans changed to the point where they became a different species. Languages evolved like this. Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Italian are all similar, and they come from a single shared language spoken by an isolated group of people long ago. But as that group spread out and were cut off from each other, their languages began to change very slowly over time. Over hundreds of years, they each became distinct to the point where they became new languages. Getting back to Homo naledi, humans are primates. And the primate lineage has its roots in creatures that were arboreal, which means they live in trees. The most ancient primate species still with us today, such as lemurs, tarsiers, bush babies, and lorises, spend almost all of their time in trees. There are signs of this in the anatomy. Look at this finger bone of an orangutan. It's extremely curved, which helps it hang from branches. The foot bones have this same kind of curvature to them. Human finger bones and toe bones do not have this kind of curvature to them. The evolution of humans involves the transition of a life in the trees to a life on the ground. The reason Homo naledi was such a significant discovery in 2015 was Homo naledi shows traits connected to life in the trees and life on the ground. The bone structure of Naledi's lower body is almost exactly like modern humans. We don't know why Africa lost so many of its trees, but if the genus Homo was going to make it, then they needed to adapt to be able to walk on the ground. The pressure to evolve a lower body suited to bipedalism was much higher than the pressure to modify the upper body. And because of this, Naledi has a much more primitive upper body. Apart from having a flat face and a small brain case, Naledi also has curved finger bones. Not as curved as an orangutan, but again, it's a transition. I'll repeat, Homo sapiens did not come from Homo naledi. Instead, one population of humans with the lower body structure shared by Homo sapiens and Homo naledi eventually drifted apart. One group evolved into Homo naledi, and the other group eventually evolved into Homo sapiens. Next time, we're going to take a look at what are called homologous structures and comparative anatomy. Thanks for watching.